Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I've just returned from Whistler, a place I used to spend a ton of time at. And man, that place is a bubble of awesomeness. The mountain, while it needed a few dumps, was the most fun mountain I've skied this year. But the trip sure had its moments. We started in Vancouver, and that's when we realized that the cracking in Angie's feet were going to be a problem. See, her chemotherapy has her skin all messed up, and her feet, well, it's a combination of mini cut crevasses per se on the bottoms of her feet, and then ingrown toenails everywhere else. It's such a strange side effect, which really impacted our ability to walk anywhere. Ange powered through it and made the most of the trip, but she was in a lot of pain. So we were dealing with that. And then, when we get to Whistler, at 1 a.m. the first night, we wake up to Keaton puking in the kitchen of the condo. After an hour of cleaning and Keaton in the bathroom puking, we realized that he was down with a bad case of food poisoning. Looks like I'm going to be skiing solo in the morning. So I wake up, I walk to the gondola, and when I'm going through the maze, the RFID thing, I get stopped by a lifty. Looks like I had both Keaton and my pass on me, and it scanned Keaton's. They must have thought I was breaking the law. But no, I explained myself, I showed my other pass, and I had to go wait in a line to talk to people. This took about an hour, and I was finally told I was good to go and that Keaton's pass would be loaded back up with his 2 full days to go ski the next day. So I ski, it was awesome, I go hot tub, I get a burger from Splits, and I'm loving my Whistler time. The next morning, Keaton's feeling better and it's time to go ski again. So we go to the gondola and Keaton's pass is flagged. We get out of line again, we're in the same line that I was in the day before, and when I get to the front, the dude is like, "Sorry man, you've been flagged for unauthorized use of this pass," and I explained the situation to him. And he's like, there is absolutely nothing that he can do for me. What I need to do is I need to wait for an email from Whistler Blackcomb giving me further instructions so I can rectify the situation and get my pass back. I would probably get it tomorrow or the next day, which I let him know was unacceptable because I was on vacation. I had bought these way too expensive passes months ahead of time to make sure that we had reasonably priced passes instead of the $300 ones that they were going to try to sell me. And he told me there was no chance in hell that I was going to be able to get a pass from him because it was just not possible for him in his little kiosk to re-up the pass for me. And that's just how it was. So I do what any American does and I ask for the manager. The manager comes up and the first thing she tells me that is even if she figures out the problem, I'll still need to wait for my email from Whistler and I wouldn't get it today. So if I wanted to ski, I would have to buy Keaton a $300 lift ticket. I was pissed and I let this person know it. As I was explaining myself further, I could see her slowly but surely start to comprehend what had happened, and she was kind of getting the idea that I was in the right here and she was in the wrong. She then reprinted Keaton's pass and even gave me a $20 food voucher for wasting my time over 2 days. I wish I would have gotten both of their names. These employees, while trying to be the nice Canadians that I'm sure they were raised to be, were also trying to be the judge and jury over a stupid miscommunication. When she handed me my pass, I let her know that it's not right to blatantly lie in customers' faces. She's like, "What?" And I told her that both her and her other ticket seller both told me that even if I was right, there was no way that they could print off a ticket or update the pass from their little kiosk here. And based on the fact that she just printed it out in front of my face, she was totally lying to me when she said that, and that wasn't cool. While I was pissed, I had to let it go, and I did. To the 2 Whistler employees that I encountered that almost ruined my vacation, I hope your next vacation gets ruined by a shitty employee like yourself. While mine wasn't ruined, that's because I'm a good talker, and neither of you two have that skill based on my experience talking to you. That's enough about me complaining. Other than those crappy Vail employees, my trip was amazing. But I had to get back to my desk as soon as possible and record the episode that you're going to hear today, and it's a business episode. While I was emceeing the High Fives Foundation Silver Tie Gala in Reno, the musical talent was a former ski industry rep turned Nashville up-and-coming country music star, Mark Mackay. After shooting the shit with Mark for a bit, I knew he would be a great podcast guest, and he sure was. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the show and subscribe wherever you listen. It really does help things grow. And even more important than that is supporting my amazing sponsors. That's what keeps the show going, and I only work with the best brands in the business. And they are Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Elan Skis, Best Day Brewing, and Seek Skate Camp. Now, let's talk with Mark Mackay. First and foremost, you've had all these rad jobs in life, and ones that usually come with at least a little bit of the rock star lifestyle, but you've always been the one who doesn't drink. Have you ever partied, or have you always stayed away from drugs and alcohol?
Man, what a great question. No, and it's fun. Nobody ever clarifies that because I feel like they're always afraid of making me want to talk about something I don't want to talk about or something. I have nothing against it. Everybody around me does. I have never had a sip of alcohol or a drug ever in my entire life. And I sort of wish I had a better explanation for why, but never, not once.
But you still go out and you hang out with all the people doing all the stuff. That doesn't really affect you, right? You just don't need that juice.
Yeah. Trust me. I mean, touring the way I do, the stuff that I see every night. Yeah, I definitely hang out with people that partake in anything. But I don't even know if I could consciously say that I don't need the juice, but I guess I don't since I don't do it. But yeah, it's wild. I always think back, like, I feel like high school or college is where you try things, and college is probably where you overuse things. And then you kind of figure your life out from there, and you were talking about rad jobs. I had a job in the ski industry that I was always kind of driving, and I had to be on all the time. And so I never drank. I don't know why.
But I hear that since you don't do alcohol and drugs, there is one drug or two drugs that you really are known to abuse. They're just over-the-counter ones, sugar and caffeine. And what's the story behind the O'Neill event where other reps felt like they needed to take your keys because you just had too much, you were too wired?
Oh, this is going to be the best interview ever. Yeah, man. So check this out. I'm working this event at a Warren Miller event in Reno. And my buddies that work for Burton Snowboards were in the booth next to me. And they had just signed a partnership with Sobe Drinks. And Sobe had just come out with this first energy drink. Like Red Bull had obviously been around, but I didn't drink it then. But Sobe came out with this drink that it just looked a little less intense. And it was called like Sobe Adrenaline or something. And so the guys were like, hey, man, you got to try some of this. So I must have had 15 of them. It was fun, man. I was up all night. I can only imagine who told you that story, but I was probably playing blackjack with them all night. And anyway, every time I went to some of these events, like that night in Santa Rosa, I probably just drank too much Red Bull, man. But I was a little jittery, so I'm glad they took the keys.
All right. Well, anyway, you grew up in the Bay Area. And what sports teams did you grow up rooting for? And were team sports important to you growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I played baseball for a long time, and that was really my main sport. I shouldn't say I was a diehard Giants fan. I feel like I don't follow baseball as much as I used to. I watch all sports, but I was totally into the Giants, totally into the Niners. I wish I was into the Warriors more than I was. When I lived in San Francisco a little later in my life, I was going to games and I was kind of into it a little bit, but baseball was always my jam.
With the Niners losing the Super Bowl, was that just a huge blow to you, or was it not a big deal?
No, it was not a big deal. I'm going to offend so many of my Bay Area fellow sports fans, but I grew up loving the Niners, and I feel like when I lived in San Francisco and I was going to games at Candlestick, and then I was kind of a Jim Harbaugh fan too. I was kind of an Alex Smith fan too. So all of a sudden it was like there was a quarterback switch, then there was a stadium switch, and then there was some management shakeups, and I just got a little bit checked out on the Niners. So I watch them, I'm happy for them, but I'm not the passionate Niner fan that I was.
Okay. How about skiing? How do you get into that, and when does that happen?
Yeah, so the skiing thing is so funny. So I'm like the definition of what we would, in the industry, we would have always called like a weekend warrior. I didn't grow up ski racing. I didn't even grow up in a family that was all that passionate about skiing. Just once a year, we would take a weekend vacation in North Star or Yosemite or wherever the heck we would go. And I just loved skiing. I do consciously remember sitting there in high school waiting for that week to get out so we could leave for ski week in Tahoe or something. And I don't think there was anything I looked forward to more than skiing at the time.
And then there was music, and I read that you're a classically trained pianist. And what does that mean? Were you some sort of child prodigy, or did you just take lessons from an early age?
Well, I was sort of forced to take lessons at a young age. My mom gets always a little bit mad when I say it that way, but that is the truth. I wasn't all that passionate about learning to play piano, but that was just one of those things. My mom and dad said, you want to do anything else? You want to golf? You want to ski? You want to do anything? You have to take piano lessons. So I took lessons, but at that age, when you're learning to play piano, they're not teaching you how to improvise on a B3. They're teaching you how to play Mozart and Beethoven, So that was where it all started for me. everyone in the business music industry who knows me now knows that that's where sort of my passion for music and songs came from, because it's the piano where you learn how chords go together and stuff. So that was the beginning of it all.
And when kids are into skiing and classical pianism, I just like saying that word, pianism, it sounds like there could be a silver spoon kind of life. Did you grow up with money, or is that something that I'm just assuming?
No. I mean, I certainly grew up in a middle-class family of parents that worked their asses off. And no, we didn't have a difficult life by any stretch. I applaud my parents that go find my sister. I have one sister, and neither of us believe that we grew up with any money at all. And I think they did such a good job of instilling how hard you have to work for things. And we did. We lived a totally amazing life. I have no horror stories there at all. But I feel like all of it was you work hard, you play hard, you know?
Yeah. And then are there any other things that you do as a kid? Are there any other opportunities that your parents give you when you're coming up?
Well, my parents were like really encouraging of us to, I always joke, my mom put this cross stitch she made for me very young, and it said, follow your dreams, for who knows what tomorrow may bring. And it was on my wall from when I was like 4 years old or something, and I feel like I'm sort of the textbook of growing up in a family that kind of believes in the American dream. I don't think there was anything that my parents didn't say, if you want to do it, you can accomplish anything. So that included whether we wanted to try out and play basketball and soccer in school, or, extracurriculum type stuff, or, anything was the sky's the limit. But you've zeroed in on my main loves.
Okay. And then with music, you're practicing piano and learning Beethoven. Do you pick up other instruments as you're growing up? Do you get a guitar when you're like 12 and start figuring that out?
Yeah, you've got the timeline right there. Like, I always joke that like piano was where I learned, music theory and the structure of music, but the guitar is where I learned to be cool. I still don't know if I'm cool or not, but that was certainly the intention of picking up that instrument. I do remember, this was kind of a cool breakthrough. I do remember being a bit of an outsider in middle school, like, not one of the cool kids, for a dumber thing to say. And I remember like playing in the talent show and like shredding a Stevie Ray Vaughan guitar solo, and all of a sudden like the cutest girl in the school was like, Mark, that was amazing. And I was like, this is going to be okay. We're going to be okay.
Nice. And then when you get to high school, how do you describe yourself? Your look, your music, what kind of shit are you into?
When I went to high school, all I ever wanted to do was be like a news reporter. So I was always like, I don't know, I was really into like politics. I was really into current events in the history of the United States. And the music thing was like on the weekends. We played this weekend gig that we had at this coffee shop, and my sister was in the band, and a drummer and a keyboard player. And we just played covers. We called ourselves a blues band, but in reality, we were playing rock and roll. But my grades ended up going so far downhill that I was forced to torpedo that for a little while, for a couple of years there. And then I figured it all out again.
Well, it sounds like after high school, you went to college, and did you have any sort of plan, or is that kind of just what you were supposed to do and you did it?
Well, I certainly wanted to go to college. I also really wanted to further my life in the ski industry. I had a little bit of taste of, I had worked in a ski shop. And so I wanted to accomplish both. My career goal was to be a broadcast journalist. So I went to UNR. I was a journalism student at UNR and a marketing minor. And then from the minute I got there was a Rossignol ski rep named John Darby. He lived in Tahoe and Truckee. And so here I was on my way to school one day, and I saw his Rossignol van parked outside his house. And I was just like, man, I want that job, So I parked one day and I ran down and knocked on the door and I said, hey, do you remember me, man? I was like, I worked at this ski shop, and he gave me a job. He said, yeah, I totally remember you. And if you want to go sell some skis for us, go do it. And that was how my career in the industry started. So I was working both of them, man.
That's interesting, because I didn't know about the Rossignol thing. I heard that you kind of got your foot in the door through something with Atomic when you were like 19 years old, after like your freshman year in college, where you went and did a test period at Mount Hood, where you're kind of just learning the product and also working on skis for the race guys and the park guys as well. So you do Rossignol before that. How does that transition into you meeting people at Atomic?
It is funny. Like, I asked John for a job, and I got basically a little side gig with him to go down to the Bay Area and sell some skis on the weekends or whatever. So I did that.
Were you just poaching stores and just like standing on the floor and selling skis?
Yeah, totally. I was going into, like, at the time it was Any Mountain or REI or whatever, and just saying, hey, I'm here from Rossignol and I'm just going to help you guys. And if you have any questions, and that was it. I was a promo kind of guy,
A hired sales gun.
Yep, exactly. And then one day, a guy named Jim Fowler at Dynastar said, well, we're trying to bring on a new position now. And he hired me. And so I actually had this little stint with Rossignol that then led to this next little stint with Dynastar that quickly led into the full-time job with Atomic right after. And really, at the end of the day, I think everyone in that world remembers me from Atomic more than anything else.
Yeah, so how does the Atomic thing line up? So you have these two jobs, and then someone says, hey, do you want to come to Hood for the summer and see if you're a good fit for our brand?
No, because I was a terrible fit for the brand at the time. So I'm glad that nobody thought that way. You know, what happened was there was a sales rep down in the Bay Area who I had also met when I worked in this. So I had worked at Any Mountain when I was literally like 16. I had just gotten my driver's license and I got this retail job selling skis. And I met all these reps from them coming in to teach me about their skis. And I was just the excited 16-year-old, you know. So I had met the Atomic rep at that time, who was a guy named Rob Dill, still a friend of mine. And so Rob lived in the Bay Area. He was looking to hire a full-time rep. And I was really always more of a sales guy than anything else. I didn't grow up ski racing. I didn't speak wax types and tuning like other guys do. That wasn't my thing. I was a sales guy. And so that's how Rob saw me. He saw me as somebody who could help sell, right? So I got the job. And it was a whirlwind, man. It's actually a story I love telling because I had to fly to New Hampshire to pick up our van. And when I got there, my sales manager at the time, he was supposed to spend like a couple days with me. I'm literally like 19 years old here, right? So I was supposed to spend like a couple days with him to like learn about stuff. And instead I showed up and he had like a doctor's appointment and he went, sorry, man, I appreciate you coming in. I got to leave. Here's the keys to the van. Take your time driving back to California from New Hampshire, right? Take your time and go see the world, you know, and enjoy, you know. And that was, so I got no training. So I got home to California after seeing the country. Biggest inspiration that ever happened to me was that road trip, by the way. That was where everything in my life changed, was getting to drive across the country at that age.
Huh.
And I pulled in and then they were like, well, you're going to have to go to Mount Hood for training. And that was rough for me. That was, and I think anybody who was there would retell that story well. I mean, I was a total fish out of water in that world, but I figured it out quick. You know, that's what you have to do to survive sometimes.
When you sign on with Atomic, the brand was in a totally different place. Were these the days of like the sugar daddies and the triplets?
This was actually before then, just a little bit though. That whole period of time for Atomic for me sort of blends together because that was a lot of trials and tribulations going on there. Like the triplets, man, you're going to make me cry thinking about those days. That's crazy. That was when Atomic was heavily a race company and was trying so hard to figure out how to get into the other side of the world. But it was, you know, Mount Hood obviously was all about race and we were the premier brand at it at the time. So it was hard work for me to learn that stuff.
How often are you skiing at that point? Are you going up there with the racers? Or is it more that you're down low, making sure all the product is ready to go?
Yeah, no, at that time I was doing a lot more hanging out in the garage and government camp, like learning about stuff than I was actually out there. I was joking with my friend Jake Strasburger the other day, who I love to death. And he was one of the first guys that was there when I got there and really took me under the wing. And we had a great run there together at the company. But he'll tell you the very first time that they loaded me up with 20 pairs of race skis and sent me up, I practically fell off the chairlift getting off. I was a liability at that point on the race side of things. So I was hiding in the garage.
And then when you think about you as a sales rep, I mean, it's all about being a people person and being able to sell product, but you're a road warrior too. And when you were learning it, it sounded like you were famous for doing star routes instead of loops. Can you explain that for people that might not get it?
I will explain it. And I will say that I had an idea who told you about taking my keys in Santa Rosa. And I definitely know who that was now because I know all about star routes. Yeah, like an idiot, I was driving one direction to go deliver a pair of skis or something when the entire rep force of Northern California was driving the other direction for an event. And we all waved at each other and they were like, why are you going east, dude? Every single one of us is going west, you know? And that became the joke. But you think I did some star pointing then? You don't even want to know as a touring musician what star patterns are like now.
But with star patterns as a touring musician, is it somebody else blindly booking you and you having to go on those tours? Or is it you making your life miserable?
No, well, so for one thing, I'm like totally addicted to being on the road. I tend to not think of traveling in the same capacity that other people do. So yeah, a little bit of that might be torturing myself. But the other thing is that when you're on the way up in the music industry, it's about playing shows that matter. And when you get a call for certain opportunities, if that answer is not, yes, I'll be there, aye, Captain, you're not getting that call the second time. So sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. And that's fine. I'm totally okay with it.
Okay. And then you repped Atomic, but I think you're also the O'Neill rep. And what's interesting about that is that the O'Neill reps, for the most part, they had the lifestyle and outerwear categories, and that was it. But you had lifestyle, outerwear, rubber, and board shorts. Why were you the only rep that had all categories?
Well, how honest do you want me to be about all that?
You might as well be totally honest.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that surfing was we haven't talked about surfing, but that was really my favorite thing in the world. Ask any ski rep what Mark was doing on a powder day. And if I wasn't skiing, I was probably chasing the swell that was hitting the coast at the same time.
Everybody says you're a way better surfer than skier.
Who said that?
A bunch of different people. They just said you kill it on a surfboard.
That's funny. That's sweet. Well, that was always my favorite sport, And so it's interesting. I grew up surfing in Santa Cruz, and I worked at O'Neill surf shops in the summer, and the O'Neill family means a lot to me. And I love those guys, and I wore their wetsuits, and I remember watching Jack O'Neill out on his balcony when the waves were big. I mean, it's a major part to me. So one day I get this call to go work for O'Neill because they're looking for a sales rep for, I guess it was Northern California, but it was all categories. And yeah, I kind of had that reputation of being able to take on a lot and get stuff done. And I knew one day into taking that job that I had made the most colossal mistake ever, actually. Everything about that I thought was going to be so exciting. And O'Neill split into many divisions, like you just said. And I love the wetsuit guys. Selling the rubber was fantastic. It was technical. It was business oriented. It was amazing product. Dealing with the guys that sold the clothing and everything else. The dumbest thing I ever did was go to work for those guys. I think they're about the most insanely backwards people I ever worked for. Actually, I think their priorities were totally in the wrong place. And I got no credit whatsoever for wanting to grow a brand or focus on the business. If I wasn't out partying with pro surfers or smoking weed with all of them or doing whatever, nobody cared. That's all they knew about in that world, was just being the cool guy. And I've never been that guy. I've always been about business. So that was a relatively miserable time in my life, but I love the family and I love the wetsuits, for the record.
Okay. So you're this skier, surfer who's got this incredible job in the ski business, but you're also a musician and you grew up being a musician. Are you still playing music when you're being a sales rep at that point?
No. Nobody even knew that I knew how to play a guitar. In fact, I had this girlfriend. I lived with her for 5 years. And if you could, I don't know where she is right now, thank God. But if you found her and said, can you believe Mark's touring the world and has a record deal and that's what he does? She would say, I didn't even know he knew how to play a chord. I was totally absent from my life in that time.
So did you know the Matt Reardons of the world when you were in Tahoe at that point, or?
Nope, not at all.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break. And I want you to buy all of your ski and snowboard gear from Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Why Peter Glenn? Well, first and foremost, they're the little guy who's been getting people out on snow for over 65 years. They aren't trying to take over an industry by making a ton of branded products that compete with the brands they already sell. They're not trying to get you to stay at a hotel or sell you a vacation. Peter Glenn is about making sure you purchase the right products to ensure that you're going to have the most fun on the hill. And they have all the brands, all the products, and incredible deals both in-store and online. While other retailers focus on algorithms and AI, Peter Glenn is all about having the most knowledgeable staff that understands what you need. And if you've been following them on Instagram, they've been dropping some incredible pro tips that will make your time on the hill more enjoyable. At the end of the day, people have trusted Peter Glenn since 1958 because of their proven track record and all-around passion for snow and beyond. So if you ski, snowboard, inline skate, wakeboard, water ski, or need outerwear for your adventure, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports is your one-stop shop, and they offer free shipping on orders over $50, a hassle-free return policy, and they price-match reputable dealers. So please support this podcast and buy your stuff over at peterglenn.com. Next up, it's Elan Skis. I started telling you about Elan building a cult following in the States about 3 years ago. And if you're like me and heading up to the mountain on a weekly basis, I know you've been seeing more Elans. There's a reason for that. People who ski Elans notice that skiing on award-winning products made in what is considered the best factory in the world will make them a better skier. The product they put into the marketplace is second to none. I mean, Elan's a company that also makes luxury yachts, and they don't cut corners on materials or production. The difference in quality is noticeable. Walk up to any ski wall and compare the craftsmanship of an Elan ski to everything else on the wall. You'll see a difference in the fit and finish, but the most important difference is how they'll perform on snow. That's why Elan's been winning a ton of awards at the magazine tests, because they really do ski better. If you want to have more fun on the mountain this season, get on an Elan. You can find out about all things Elan over at elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, and if you haven't been hearing a lot about Stanley lately, you must be living under a rock. They've absolutely blown up in 2023, and everyone is talking about them. I've been telling you about how incredible their products are at keeping your drinks hotter and colder than anyone else's for about 7 years now. I mean, they invented the category in 1913. And while they always have done well, the world now knows that if you don't have a Stanley, you don't have the best. And I love having the best. Personally, I use Stanley pint glasses every single day, and I swear by them. And my wife and so many others can't live without their Stanley quenchers. And recently, I've integrated Stanley food storage devices into my ski routine. Instead of buying $20 burgers, we bring our food to the mountain and it stays piping hot in our Stanleys. And I end up saving about $70 a weekend not buying food. While that's rad, what's even radder is that Stanley offers Powell Movement listeners their biggest discount that they make available to the public. I'm going to save you 30% on all your Stanley products. Here's what you need to do to get that discount. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and at checkout, enter the code SNOW30. That's all caps and the number 30 with no spaces, and you'll save that 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. You're with Atomic at that point when the whole Amer acquisition went down. So when it starts, like your home base is in New Hampshire, but then the whole purchase thing happens and they fall under the whole like Amer, Solomon, that whole group. Everything moves to Utah. Does that change everything to you? Like, are you worried about losing your job?
No, I never was. Part of that might have just been being very young. I probably should have been worried about it, but I wasn't. When I started at Atomic, I think there was like 8 or 9 people employed by, or, you know, in some capacity, race, promo, tech reps, sales reps all over California and Arizona. When that move happened, I became the guy for all of California and Nevada, all by myself, just one guy, which, you know, part of that was the state of the business at the time. But the other part was just shoring things up and trying to make it all profitable, you know. But no, that was a very exciting time, actually. That was an amazing turning point for Atomic and for that merger with Solomon. And I remember when Chris Benchetler got involved. I think he's just amazing. He's still one of my favorite guys I've ever interacted with. And it was a cool time.
Who was more important to the brand at that point? Was it Jordan Judd or Chris Benchetler?
Yeah, great question. You know, they get it equally. I always said that I think Jordan is one of the most forward-thinking. You know, it's hard to be both those roles. It's hard to be a marketing guy and a CEO in a way, and he really had an amazing vision. And I think that team that he assembled there and where the brand went, it was like overnight people woke up and went, "Whoa, okay, well, whole different company."
From the rep's perspective, I mean, is it one of those things where it's like overnight, like you say, you wake up and you're like, wow, this is exciting. I'm not a loser anymore. I'm selling shit people want.
You feel it instantly, you know. I mean, when you like to talk in very like ski terms, you know, you walk into a ski shop with a buyer that you know personally who's going to shoot you straight. I always thought that's one of the funny things that happens when you're a sales rep, right? You go to the meeting, you just get hopped up. You go to the sales meeting, everybody's fired up. You're the hottest brand in the world. Next year is going to change your life, man. This is going to be the biggest thing we've ever done. And then you get back and you meet with one of your accounts who you trust and you show them something and they go, yeah, man, I think that's ugly. You know, did you know that Volco makes a ski in the same price point that's so much better? We would never buy that. And you're kind of like, well, okay, cool. You know, but there was moments there with Atomic where you'd come back and say, hey, what do you think? You know, and you could feel dealers going, oh my God, did you guys figure this out? You know, it was that exciting. It changed really, really fast.
You mentioned the excitement of a sales meeting, but I hear one of the first meetings when the brands all came together, they had a huge sales meeting and you had to miss it because of American Idol. How far did you make it into that first, I guess, foray into the American Idol world?
Yeah, I think I got to tryouts and then that's right. I'm trying because I went for it twice. I did the deal and then they asked me to stand around and they were singing another room. And then that's where I got cut. But, you know, I like that that's how people remember me, that I missed the sales meeting over that. I don't think I missed the sales meeting. I was probably late, though.
Well, it's not that they remembered it. They just said that there was a sales meeting that you weren't at because you had to be at American Idol, which is pretty cool. And in thinking of you not doing anything with music throughout your whole repdom, what made you decide to do American Idol? Were you just like, I have this talent. It's been sitting dormant. I might as well just check it out.
Yeah, so I may not have been playing music and I may not have been performing in any way, but don't think that ever wasn't in the forefront of my mind, right? If you found me in high school and said, besides the journalism thing, and said, what else do you want to do? I would have said, I want to play in a band. That was my thing. I was the guitar player. So as much as I wasn't sort of an active musician in that sense, it never left the forefront of my mind that I should really figure out how to play guitar again. And that was the beauty of Idol and The Voice and all these reality shows that came around, is that they gave life to the Mark Mackays in that formula. They gave life to people all over the country that was like, man, I think I have a talent and should I go try to do something with it? And I still think that's a spectacular thing.
And is that a weird process, just going through and almost being like poked and prodded and judged by every single person in every room that you go to? Is it just a total weird existence?
I chuckle about it now because, that's just a different, everything about reality television and music that's a different world. At the time, was any of it weird or offensive or anything? No, man, it's show business. It's what you expect. You know what I mean? Just is what it is. You roll with it.
You do eventually transition out of repping skis. I'll talk about that in a minute. But was there a time towards the end of your ski rep game, or maybe right after repping, where you were a professional gambler as well?
I'm still a professional gambler. Trust me. I gamble every hour of every day. But as far as like actually playing blackjack, there was a part of time in my life there where, those blackjack winnings might have been counted as income. They were good days, man.
How much do you think the most you've ever won playing blackjack in a night is?
I had, not outrageously spectacular numbers, but I do remember very vividly playing at the Wynn Hotel right after it opened. We were there for the show, I think, actually. No, it couldn't have been. It would have been late. So I think I discovered it when we were at the show, but I don't think I was old enough to gamble yet. But there was one night that I turned like a couple $100 into, I don't know, 7,000 or 8,000 or something. And I remember rolling pretty hard on that. That was a really special night.
Yeah, I can imagine. So with the rep world, everything seems like it's going well for you. The brand has kind of done a 180. They're doing really well. And what people do say about you is that you're quick to reinvent yourself. And when you do, you crush it wherever else you go. What made you want to decide to leave the ski rep world where at such a young age, you had already nailed a job that people would die for?
Yeah, I appreciate you calling that. It makes me feel special that that's the way it's looked at, and that is the way I looked at it too. The evolution of my life was the ski rep thing, which then became O'Neill, and then became a very, very short-lived chapter that people don't know about, which was, it lasted 3 months. That was medical device sales, and then that's what sent me into music world. My deal with is this: I think at the end of the day, I got to the point where I sensed that I wasn't the right fit anymore to be an active sports rep. Working in that industry is amazing. I still, to this day, it's my biggest identity. They're the most wonderful people. I could never do what I do now if I didn't do that. But Atomic needed somebody that passionately cared about the brand and skiing, and I just wasn't that guy anymore, and I'm not saying anybody was trying to push me out. I don't think I was on the brink of getting fired or anything. I thought my time was numbered. Some of those days were starting to feel like work, going to demo days and listening to the same speech over and over again. I like to think I have decent self-awareness, and I just knew it was time for me to go on and do something else, and you made the comment earlier. It's a really great thing that I never talk about because sometimes it's just a weird thing to talk about. But you said all the things I've done come with a rock star lifestyle. I actually, if I'm being honest, I actually felt like a lot of the stuff I was doing, I was almost faking that lifestyle a bit. Like with the ski reps and stuff, it was more about going out, flying from one event to the next and being the cool guy than it was about caring about the brand. And at the end of the day, that's not how this is supposed to go, so it was the right time.
And so when you get out of all the sports business completely, you head to San Francisco. Yep. It sounds like you're selling pharmaceuticals. Sounds like you have a pretty sick place on the water, or that's what I was told. And it sounds like in no time you went from like a rep to a regional VP. I don't know if that's true because it sounds like you left after like a month, but you only have like a year's worth of college experience. Do they even care in pharmaceutical sales about the education, or is it just more like you're a sales guy, go sell?
Yeah, well, to clarify, it was medical devices, not pharmaceuticals, so I can't speak to what pharmaceuticals want. But in the medical devices world, it's about selling experience. Most of the people that I was competing against, they had just sold at different office supply companies or whatever. It's about selling. It's not about anything else. And that was why it wasn't exciting. And I mean no harm to that industry. A lot of people make unbelievable livings in that world, so all the power to them. For me personally, why it was so short-lived was, it was an amazing payday and it was an amazingly kind of cushy job, but I was selling to doctors who have got bazillions of years in medical education. They've written theses. They've changed the course of modern medicine. And what? I'm being tasked to sell them a product because I'm a good talker? Right. I don't know. At that point, it was almost degrading.
And this is also around the time I think you play your first show in Stockton, California. It's like the 856 nightclub.
Yep.
What's that experience like? And is that what inspires you to quit your job and pack up life and head to LA for music and school?
So in those months that I was finishing out my time in San Francisco and trying to figure myself out, right? I mean, obviously what you've learned so far from this interview is the Atomic thing really defined most of my time there. And then all of a sudden there was this quick change to O'Neill, and I couldn't stand them. And then there was this quick change to medical devices. And then I love the people. I didn't like the job, whatever. But at that moment, I'm starting to play my guitar a little bit again, and I've gone through a breakup that was really hard on me. And I think you'll learn that most people, when they write songs, that happens because someone's crushed them into 1,000 pieces,
Right.
So I'm sitting here starting to play a little bit, and I'm starting to have this feeling. And I just told this story on a radio interview the other day, but what happened was I had a meeting with a doctor in Hawaii, and I flew to Hawaii, and I decided to take my guitar with me because I just loved playing it again so much. I went on a paddleboard in the morning, and I had my meeting, and then I had one more day in Hawaii to just hang out. And so right there in Waikiki, I rented a paddleboard, and I went for a paddle out towards Diamond Head. And I was out there paddling around with these dolphins and turtles, and it was just the most wonderful day. And I thought, you know what? If I don't try to do something in music, and I don't half-ass anything. I don't care what anybody says about me. I think most people would argue that if I do anything, I do it to a pathetic percentage. It's 500% of my life.
Okay.
And so I just said, I think it's time. I think it's time to try to do something in the music industry and be a rock star, and let's go for it. And like a scene out of a romantic comedy, I paddle in on my paddleboard, and the guy goes, "Hey man, how was it out there?" I go, "It was good." He goes, "All right, well, thanks, whatever." I said, "Hey, can you just hold that one sec? Actually, I think I'm going to take it for a few more hours, And I grabbed my phone. I called my landlord in San Francisco. I put notice in on my apartment. I called my job, and I told him I quit. And I called the music school in Los Angeles and Hollywood that I had been researching. And I said, "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what a career even looks like, but I'd like to enroll in music school." And they said, "Well, come by next week for an orientation." And then I looked at the guy and said, "Cool, man, I'm just going to keep the paddleboard for the rest of the day." And I just paddled around in Hawaii. I never looked back, actually. It was one of the greatest days ever.
That's a pretty amazing story. And at this point in your life, when you think about the music that you're into, were you always into country music?
No, I wasn't. I mean, I grew up on classic country. Like when I was a kid, my dad was playing me Willie Nelson and Glenn Campbell records on this little cassette tape we had. That kind of country, sure, But right at that moment in time when I was leaving, country music went through this transition where all of a sudden it was starting to sound like rock and roll with a banjo. Keith Urban, if you ever saw Keith live, I mean, it was a rock show, So that was just sort of like what I was listening to at that time. That was what the fans loved. And so, yeah, there was an identity with that. But I certainly don't ever pretend to be a country boy in that sense,
What made you pick LA? Because I would think that LA is not the right place for a country music guy to start a career. But what do I know?
You'd be surprised that like the California country sound and a lot of what is today called Americana, back then it was just, when I first went to LA and I'm going to music school, they're telling me about different jam nights in LA. And it was like every Monday night was the Cowboy Palace in Chatsworth. Every Wednesday was Cowboy Country in Long Beach. Every Friday was or Wednesday was the Sugar Mill in Tarzana. So there was a country scene everywhere. So every night of the week we had a bar to play in, an audience to listen. But, eventually if you kind of graduate out of that stuff a little bit, the universe pulls you to Nashville. I didn't know about Nashville at the time. I mean, for a kid who grew up in the Bay Area, Nashville is like, that's like another country, But,
yeah, totally.
You figure it out fast.
And going to school at like 2014, you're already a little bit older than everybody, I would think, because you've lived a bit. So are you the older, more focused guy when you get to school?
Yeah. I got to tell you, you asked the best questions. That's another thing that I never really get to share on, which is, yeah, that was a problem. A lot of those kids in music school had just graduated high school and they're just going into music school. I just want to shred on my guitar, and I'm over here trying to figure out how to morph it into a real life. And by the way, I told someone on day one, I sat down with the counselor and he said, "What's the goal?" And I said, "To sell out the biggest stadiums in the world." And he goes, "Oh, I like that. No, seriously, what's the goal?" I go, "Dude, I don't know what else to tell you. To sell out the biggest stadiums in the world. I didn't come here to do anything on a small scale, And he didn't know what to do with me. That guy, he was kind of like, okay, because that's not always what music school teaches you. It teaches you how to make a living in music, teaches you how to be able to be proficient enough you could teach lessons, or how you could run a school, or all these other things, but they can't really teach you how to be a star. That's not what music school does. And so, yeah, that was hard, because I thought, well, hell, maybe I'll play in somebody's band. Maybe I'll produce an artist. I don't think I even had a plan of what I was going to do there, but I quickly learned, like, I'm going to have to dive in here and create an entire empire if I want to pull this off. There's nobody else is going to help me do this. Help is probably the wrong word. Nobody else is going to be willing to star pattern their way around the United States going broke to get this over the finish line as I am. And I'm going to have to just do it myself.
It's like you hustle more than anyone else. And to make a name for yourself, I would think you're looking for open mic nights anywhere you can possibly play. And is it pretty much like you said? I mean, there was like a bunch of different country scenes. So are you going to play everywhere you possibly can? Anybody who will let you play for a few minutes?
Yeah, not really like open mic nights and stuff. There were certainly some jam nights like that. Yeah, I guess you could call those open, whatever. There'd be a band playing, and the word on the street was always like, hey, if you know the guys, you could always jump in and jam with them. Well, let me tell you something. What's involved in doing that is going to that night, buying a couple drinks on the drink minimum, which obviously for me is Coca-Cola, and introducing yourself to the band and hoping that they don't think you're a tool, and suggesting that maybe we should hang out sometime. Maybe I should come back next week, and then coming back a few weeks later, letting them see you. And then eventually a few weeks after that, they see you enough that they're willing to let you jump up and play. It's a lot like trying to sell a new clothing line into a ski shop, right? That was my point to that, is that every skill I took in how to get a brand in the door. I remember calling one of the biggest online retailers. I won't say their name out loud, but I remember calling him saying, man, I'm going to be in the area tomorrow. I want to just come by and see what you think of this stuff. I wasn't going to be in the area, but they were like, yeah, man, if you're here, come on by. So I bought a ticket and went out there, and ultimately I got the stuff in the door, but it was off of relentless hustling and making it easy for them. And there is no difference in the music industry. You better be ready to do anything at any cause with any notice, and you better be cool about it. You better not be overbearing, and maybe you'll get a shot. And thank God I had all those skills, because that's how to this day we're at the level we're at this fast. And I don't mean that to sound cool. That's just the truth of the story.
When I think about it, like in comedy, there's comedians that'll go and they'll actually pay to do a set in front of like a headliner, or they'll do things where they can get that time in front of an audience. Do you have that in music where you almost have to pay someone to let you play so you can be noticed and get exposure? Or is that something that you didn't do?
There's certainly some of that stuff that happens. I mean, Los Angeles is known for that. They disguise it a little bit, but yeah, there's some of that in LA. And then at the big level, there's some of that in the touring world where bands are paying to get on tours with other people. I've done that one time where it was a blatantly pay to play thing. I knew that there was going to be a particular entertainment lawyer and a particular agent that was going to be at a Marshall Tucker Band show. And we just had nothing to back up opening for Marshall Tucker Band. We had played a couple shows. We didn't really have any market history. We couldn't prove that we were worth any ticket sales. So I think I paid $600 to have us open for Marshall Tucker Band at a venue, and it paid off. The agent that was there loved us, and he didn't know we paid to play to get on. He just got a chance to see us on a real stage with real production. Yeah, but it happens a lot in our business for sure.
The way that you're able to build a following and kind of make things happen so fast is that you tour all over and you pretty much take any show that you possibly can. And before you even think about booking shows, how do you put a band together?
That happens organically. Like, I've always been kind of a dive in head first person. So I remember, for example, I wanted to get us into this venue in Hermosa Beach when I lived in LA. So I went there and I found the guy and I said, hey man, sure enough, they had a cancellation the next Tuesday. And so here we were 3 days to go, and I booked us a gig and I have no band. Well, that's a much easier problem to have, right? You can always find musicians. So I just go back to music school, reach out to a few of the guys that I know that have been out playing, and I ask them, what is it? I have no idea. What does it cost for you to come play bass for me or keyboards for me? And there's always musicians that want to do that stuff. So I just put a band together. We wrote a set list. We rehearsed one time. We played the show, and that became the first band. Over time, you just meet so many people that now I've probably got 5 players deep in every instrument in every corner of the country, where if anything happened, I could fly a guy in last minute. He'd be able to jump in with us, kind of thing, but it takes several years and 978 shows around the United States to get to that point.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I can't tell you how much I love my gear from Outdoor Research. When I signed on with OR, I knew there wasn't an outerwear brand on the market that performs as well as what OR is developing. That's what happens when you test your gear in the absolutely terrible conditions that we can get here in the Pacific Northwest. Days in the mountains are always more fun when you're warm and dry, and I know my OR gear will always deliver that. I'll tell you, on cold days, I live in my cold front hoodie, which is hands down the warmest and most stylish puffy I've ever owned. And then when I get on snow, my snow crew jacket and pants are not only warm, but it's one of those fits where if you don't see me ski, I look like a pro. I'm so impressed with the style that OR has been bringing to the table lately. And off snow, they sent me some Feroci pants, which are now my daily drivers. Think stylish, lightweight, packable, do-anything pants with the right amount of zippered pockets and stretch to be the only pant that you'll ever need. I've been loving OR products since I bought my first OR rain jacket in 2000. And really, if you missed out on using my old discount code for OR products, well, I'm working on getting you a new code, but I can't promise anything. Sometimes you snooze, you lose. So check back for that, and in the meantime, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and check out why they're one of the fastest growing brands in snow and beyond. My next ad comes from the crew at We Are Camp. I'm talking about the best ski, snowboard, and skate camps in the U.S. High Cascade is the snowboard camp, Windell's is the ski camp, and Seek is the skate camp. And if you want to be a great parent, I highly recommend signing your kid up for a week or two of camp. I can tell you from firsthand experience that going to Seek Skate Camp helped my kid in so many ways. Not only did he get so much better at skateboarding, he was able to make lifelong friends that have shared interests, and that's a hard thing to do these days. And whenever the subject of camp comes up, my kid lights up and starts selling it to whoever's listening because it was that fun for him. On top of all that, my kid has never been more appreciative and stoked. I mean, he's a high schooler, and sending him to camp helped make Aunt and I cool again in his eyes. And now we can hold it over his head. If you want to go to camp again, buddy, you need to get good grades. And so far, that approach is working, and I know you can use that approach too. I'll tell you more about the camps in the coming months, but for now, head on over to windells.com, highcascade.com, or seekskatecamp.com to find out all the details and reserve a spot. You only have your kid for a limited time, and sending them to camp will make them love you a lot more. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing. If you haven't heard of Best Day, they are hands down the best tasting non-alcoholic beer on the market. I enjoy Best Day for so many reasons. The flavor is the most important. I swear by the hazy IPA, the Kolsch, and the Belgian White. They all taste just as good or better than their alcoholic cousins. And I'll tell you, while I haven't quit drinking, when I go to the bar, after 3 or 4 beers, I usually feel like it's time for me to head home, and everyone thinks I'm lame. But lately, I have a new routine. I'll have a Best Day every 3rd beer, and it makes my night last twice as long. And we all know lasting longer is better. If you want to have your best day or night ever, or just enjoy a few cold ones at Après, grab a Best Day, and you can forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, and forget about getting in trouble on the way home. To see all the flavors and order some beer, head on over to bestday.com. And if you're flying Alaska, you can now get a Best Day Kolsch at 30,000 feet. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. You have some original songs, but then you play some covers as well. And is it weird playing cover songs to build an audience, like playing someone else's shit, or is that just part of the game?
I think every artist answers that differently. Like for us, you know, when we're out on tour with, say, Mario Speedwagon or Gary Allen or some of these guys that we love touring with, we're on stage for an hour. I wrote 169 songs in 1 year, so we've got plenty of original material. I keep a couple of covers stacked aside that we can throw in to bring, you know, engage the crowd, or if I feel like we need an extra bit of engagement, we can go there. But, you know, at the time when you're first coming up and you're playing in bars where you're playing a lot of covers, it's just kind of what you do. Again, I don't mean this in a cocky way, but at the level I'm at now, I don't particularly enjoy playing covers. It isn't really how our world goes anymore, you know, but hey, you do it on the way up and people love you for it, you know, so it's just part of the game.
And in those early days while you played a shit ton at the Hard Rock Cafe, it sounds like the biggest gig you have early on is at Toby Keith's place. I love this bar and grill in Rancho Cucamonga. And can you describe how that gig ended up turning into gigs all over the country and how important the relationships with bookers are?
Yeah, and then I'll tell you the next part of that story that just became public, and you're just buckle up on this story. You ready for this one?
Yeah, man, I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay, so we played, we got this gig one time. I was playing guitar for a girl asked me to come accompany her on an acoustic guitar for a few $100 one Wednesday night. I went down to Toby Keith's bar, I played it, and I met the owner of the booking manager of the bar. I said, hey man, could my band ever play here? And he goes, yeah, that's fine. You know, let me check the availability. So he booked us and we did great. So we started playing that bar pretty often. And it was cool. It was almost like just a weekend gig for us when we were in music school. A bunch of us would go down there and we would just jam on Fridays and Saturdays at the Toby Keith bar. It was a great gig, great stage, great lighting, great sound, and a lot of people there. Built-in crowds, as we call them. And then one day, the vice president just happens to be in the bar, and he says, I really like your band. We have locations all over the country. Would you like to play them all? And I go, yeah, I'd love to. So we book across the country in Toby Keith bars. And we get to Denver, Colorado, and they all close almost overnight. And all of us are like, well, what do we do now? And so that's how we got out on the road. Well, what do we do now? Well, we called a bar in Wyoming and ended up getting a gig that led into something else, because we needed somewhere to play. That's another story. But at that moment in time, all of a sudden, all these Toby Keith bars closed. Well, it turns out that, and you can research this yourself. It's not just me telling you a cuckoo story, but they actually hired a mafia guy that had been in the witness protection program. They didn't hire the guy. A guy in the mafia ratted out all his partners to get into the witness protection program and then started a business opening these Toby Keith bars. Toby was loosely aligned with him. He just got paid for using the name. But basically what he was doing was he's opening these Toby Keith bars all over the country and never paying anyone, never paying the rent, nothing. And because the economy wasn't so hot, all the locations were kind of anteing up money. They were getting grants to build all this stuff. They just never paid anybody. And then one day they found out, they closed them all. Luckily, this one journalist who kind of had the backs of musicians stayed on him, and they ended up just arresting that guy. Like literally the other day. These bars have been closed for a really long time now, but they hit him on racketeering charges and conspiracy and all kinds of stuff. But that was what happened to the Toby Keith chain. It was all gone overnight.
Wow, that's pretty wild. But it sounds like that one booking agent or that one vice president was going to be the guy that was going to mentor you into getting shows all over the country. He helped book you a bunch of different shows. That all falls through. Has there been anybody else in the music industry that served as a mentor for you and helped you out?
Yeah, I mean, man, it's an endless list. There's so many people that have helped me. And I wonder why they do sometimes. I wonder if they look at me and say, I think you're a great guitar player, or they look at me and say, it doesn't matter whether you're a great guitar player or a great singer. I think you really want this and you deserve a shot. I don't know, but I've been so fortunate. Jeffrey Steele, the guy's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame. He's written hundreds of them. He's one of the most successful guys in the industry. He's taken me under his wing, booking agents from the biggest agencies in the world, bands, biggest touring bands in the world. You know, they've all helped me. I appreciate every little bit of it, you know, but I will say that it's not an industry where somebody else comes along and makes the magic happen for you. The fire has to be lit and they can kind of pour kerosene on it in a way, you know, and that's an important distinction in the music industry. Is I feel like the perception is, oh, you just get an agent and the agent just goes and books the show, or you just get a label and then like your life is set. And it's just so not like that. Everything is a giant collaboration of hard work.
And I would think it's, I don't want to say selfish, but you almost have to be selfish like a pro skier is. Like everything is about almost building your career and making it happen. And maybe there's other people that can kind of help you a little bit, but they're selfish for their own career trying to make it happen. Would that be fair to say too?
Yeah, I think that is you have to be watching out for number one. That's the program. You know, I think just being a little bit older now and looking back on my life when I was a sales rep, I was very good at closing deals. I was very good at kicking the door down and getting something done. I was terrible at following through. And I was terrible. It was always everywhere I went, we were always growing. The business was always going up and there was always a little bit of a mess around me. And everyone will say that. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. You know, that's just the nature of being very young and learning the rows of the world. I was always sort of on to the next deal. The way I run Mark Mackay's music business and the way I handle my artist career is the opposite of that. It's about intelligent, smart growth and amazing follow through. It's about always growing and doing it in the right places, doing it where it's the best look. And I have to watch out for that stuff. There's times you have to turn down shows because I don't care how much money that pays. That's a bad look for what we're doing. And luckily, when you get to the upper levels of the music industry and you're dealing with good quality agents and labels and I have good people around me, they all see it the same way too. Nobody wants you to do anything that compromises the integrity of Mark Mackay as a brand. It's taken every little bit of professional experience I've ever had to get to that point that I can say that, you know?
Yeah. And so when you think of your career from 2015 to 2018, you play so many shows. I mean, you can see the list on your website. And When you think about that, are you making any real money or are you just making ends meet with music?
No, completely no money at all. None whatsoever. You're losing money, as a matter of fact. You know, any money you make out there, you're losing money on the good stuff because all of it's an investment. I feel like that's another reason that I've managed to pull out. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong. I'm not singing a sad song here. It turns. But yeah, in those days, when you're going out on a lot of those tour runs that are a great look for the brand and you're playing to thousands of people, you're usually getting hammered financially. And that's just, you know, if you're not willing to do it, you're not going to pull it off that way, unfortunately. There's other ways to do it, but that's not the way I wanted to do it. We wanted to do it by being a great live band that made every fan one by one and held on to them. And to this day, I love once a year, twice a year, when one of us posts on socials and says, hey, where do we want to play this year, everybody? And as many people say, we saw you with REO Speedwagon last summer. Can't wait to see you again. We saw you with Tim McGraw. Can't wait to see you again. There's also people that say, I saw you at Toby Keith's bar in 2016. Been following you ever since. And that to me is the end game of the whole thing.
That is pretty cool. And I would think, knowing that you're a baseball nerd who umped Little League and high school games, how big of a deal was it for you to sing the National Anthem at Giant Stadium? Because I think that happens around 2017, 2018. And that has to be like one of those moments where your parents are beaming with pride and you're like, fuck, I've made it.
Yeah, that was a very, very special day. You know, I mean, I spent so many nights in that ballpark in AT&T Park, whether I was watching the Giants get killed in the rain, and watching them try to rebuild in the Barry Bonds era, or whether it was being there for the World Series. But I called my friend Craig Wingard and his wife, Christy. Craig's the vocal sales guy in California. And I invited them and their family to the game. They're great friends of mine. And then, of course, my family and my girlfriend, Valerie, and everybody I knew, I invited to that game. And I have this memory of like walking out and standing there on the pitcher's mound. And all of a sudden I hear Ronell, the broadcaster, say, "And now to present tonight's colors in the National Anthem, please welcome country music recording artist Mark Mackay." And thank God I just started singing, because if I had looked around at that moment, I wouldn't have, I'm not really the type that would like break down, but I would have gotten tripped up for a second there and probably forgotten the words or something. It was pretty spectacular.
Oh, it's awesome. And so there's no overnight success in the music business, but you put out your first album in May of like 2017. And when you think about that, is there a ton of excitement because you're releasing it and then you kind of look at sales happening that day? Or is it more something that you're putting out this album to kind of raise awareness about the Mark Mackay brand?
That changes over time, but I will say to this day, every time I go to sleep the night before a song comes out, I always look at myself in the mirror and go, tomorrow might be the day that your whole life changes, because at the end of the day, this is always about the song. And I don't even mean the song, I mean the songs. A music career only hinges on music. So when you're releasing music, in those early days, I probably was a little too new in the business to be able to think of it that way. Like, we wanted some product to sell at the stores. We wanted people that enjoyed seeing us live to be able to go home and listen to us. So that's really the motivation then. But, to this day, every time you put out a record, you just never know. Is tomorrow the beginning of a whole new chapter, that everything's going to be different, and it's a very special feeling. Every song I've ever put out is like that.
And when you put out an album, there's I won't say conflict of interest, but I think there's another Mark Mackay band out there. And does that make it difficult for you to get recognized, or is there any confusion about the name?
No, I mean, luckily now, like that we've been able to get verified on our social accounts and that kind of stuff. And when we signed our deal with Universal Music Group, they help market the music. So it tends to, all the links tend to point in the right direction. And so it kind of works okay now. I will say that if you ever read our tech writer, our marketing documents, there's a line that says, "Do not bill the show as the Mark Mackay band. We are Mark Mackay." If you want to clarify that there's going to be a band, like if you wanted someone to know that there was going to be 5 guys there, not just Mark solo, then you would say Mark Mackay, parentheses, full band. But whatever you do, you can't say the Mark Mackay band, because for that exact reason, I tell them there's another Mark Mackay band out there. But it hasn't really been a problem, but I'm glad you noticed that.
You have an album out. And when you think of your first break, are the Ted Nugent shows the first big thing that happens, or is it something else?
Yes. The Ted Nugent break came from a wonderful friend of mine named Doc McGee, who is...
I know the name.
Yeah, arguably the greatest music manager to ever do it. He's been amazing to me. He, kind of discovered and created everything from Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, Hootie and the Blowfish. I mean, I could go on forever. Scorpions, Kiss, he's everybody. But he saw something in me. He was getting to that point in his career. He wasn't exactly taking on new artists as management, but he put us out on this Nugent run. We played the Ryman with Ted and some amazing amphitheaters. And all of a sudden there we were 5 nights in a row or 10 nights in a row or whatever, playing to thousands of people who love guitar music out there. And it was quite refreshing.
How hard is it opening for a big name performer? Like when you know that everyone is there to see the Nuge and then they have to get through your set, is that a challenge to win fans over each night?
Yeah, it is. It's a huge challenge. And it's you get a very limited time to do it. I mean, 45 minutes on stage or an hour. And I think in those days, Ted probably gave us 30 minutes. That's also a standard time for an opener, And yeah, a lot of times your name's not even printed on the billboard. No one even knows it's happening, So it is. You've got to figure out how to. I try to be very engaging with the crowds, but you can't talk too much. So it's a matter of picking the right songs, play the hits, as we say, and make sure you tell everyone where to follow you. Get them to join your email list, whatever it takes, but you get a very short window there. And I'm telling you all the sort of business sides of it, right? On the other side, you better sound good. You better look good. You better be coherent in that stuff, cohesive in that stuff. So yeah, it's a lot. It's exhausting. Every time I get off a stage, like my girlfriend, Valerie, is just an absolute angel, but sometimes she'll be talking to me after a show and she'll be like, "Are you okay?" And it's because I'm acting just so distant in answering questions, because my brain's going 400 miles an hour. Did we cover everything we needed to cover tonight? Did that work? Did that new idea we tried go over with people? Like you'll hear me sometimes say to people like, "Hey, did they dig it? They like it?" And people are like, "Dude, will you calm down? Like it was epic." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't know. You know what I mean?" So I'm like, I overthink everything.
with opening shows for other bands, are there some bands that treat you better than others? Like, who's the best in terms of treatment to you?
They've all been really, really great to me. We're touring with a friend of ours, Gary Allen, a lot these days. You know, massive, massive country artist, such loyal fans. And I golf with him before shows, and he always gives me the code to the bus to hang out while they're on stage and stuff. He's just such an amazing guy, and I'm such a fan of his music. And so he's kind of the forefront in my mind. But, you know, when we went out with REO Speedwagon, we came off the stage and Kevin came right out of his dressing room and knocked on my door and just said, you know, it was amazing, and we appreciate you doing it. And I mean, honestly, they've all been amazing. I have nothing negative to say about anyone in that capacity. They've all been just very inspiring to watch.
Okay, so by the end of 2019, everything seems to be going your way. You have shows with Travis Tritt, you're playing some big events, and then the pandemic hits. What does that do to your whole music career? Does it shut everything down for a bit?
Yeah, shuts everything down. And really makes it hard for somebody like me, who our whole thing was built on touring and being a live act. So all of a sudden now we can't do that. And the whole world's doing live streams and Instagram lives. And that's just so never was the most exciting thing for me. But I had no choice. And then all of a sudden we started doing this series called Mark Mackay Mondays. And every Monday I'd go live on Facebook and Instagram for an hour or whatever. And obviously nothing about the pandemic is really all that fun to look back on. But in that sense, I'm so glad that I was forced to do that stuff, because I actually have learned to just love it. I love being on my socials now. I love going live. I love interacting with people. I learned who were the real fans. I learned what people really liked about me, right? Because I'm just interacting with them one-on-one. So I'd play something and somebody would comment, hey, you know, I always love when you remind me of Glenn Campbell. I love when you tell a story. Do you have any stories about this? And I go, God, that's so sweet. Yeah. And I would tell, but I got a chance to hear directly from fans and people that follow us of what it is that they like about us. And I just think that's such a cool thing.
Awesome. And then when we finally get out of the pandemic, I feel like you had a ton of momentum. Everything was coming together, and then the world stops. That has to be so frustrating for you, because you're like, I put in all this time and it's just going to stop right here. And then do you set goals of like where you want to be in a couple years after the pandemic, just to kind of have those milestones?
Well, not to circle this back to being a sales rep, but ask any rep in the industry, of any industry for that matter, but especially our friends in skis. You go into a store and put your best pitch forward and they say, no, I'm not interested. I don't want to do it. You don't walk out of there dejected. You walk out of there a little bit pissed off and ready to go back to try to win it over. Right. And there's a resilience there that, again, I'm so lucky that I had. So yeah, was that pandemic frustrating? Yeah. But did those thoughts ever cross my mind that, oh man, we've been totally stopped here. How are we going to get out of it? Not really. It was just the whole world was stopped. There was nothing you could do about it. So all I knew was we're just going to get right back out and do this. And you know, what's funny, you've heard me mention REO Speedwagon like 5 times, but I emailed my manager at the time and I said, hey man, I think REO Speedwagon's getting some shows announced in the Midwest. Can we try to open them? And he's like, man, I don't know if there's even going to be openers. There's going to be limits on how many people are allowed backstage and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know if it's worth calling in that favor and trying now, you know. And I just didn't listen to him. I sent the email anyway. And we got on those shows. And I was driving to Franklin, Tennessee to go grocery shopping or something. And I'll never forget that day. We haven't toured in a year and a half and we've been completely at a standstill. I don't think I even quite realized we were at a standstill in the level that we were. And all of a sudden I get an email from our agent that says REO Speedwagon would like to offer you to open these 3 dates or whatever that was. And I just remember getting out of the car and just looking and thinking, we're back. Just like that, we're back, you know, and we just never took our foot off the gas. That was right. Not to relive COVID, but that was right after that. We went out with REO, and right after that was when Delta variant popped up and everything tightened up again and a bunch of stuff got canceled again. But we were just back out there again. And so the minute things started moving, we were back on the road. So I never got any time to really analyze that. But I'm glad that I was hungry and just went for it, because I think had I not done that, I think there's a good chance that we would have gone into this kind of weird oblivion of what do you do next, you know? And then maybe I'd answer your question more better.
Oh, it's all good. So is COVID when you moved to Nashville? Is that like when you have the opportunity to do that?
No, I moved to Nashville when we played with Ted Nugent. One of those shows was at the Ryman Auditorium, and I just thought, that's my calling. So whenever that was, I think it was 2018 or 17.
And then when you think about what the biggest and most important show of your career is to date, what would that be?
Playing Red Rocks. We played Red Rocks in Colorado on a special thing that Axis and a magician put together, and it was called Magic on the Rocks. And it was like a magic show and a band, you know, and we got so lucky. We have a really great friend of ours out in Denver that had heard about that. She called me directly on it. I should shout her out. Her name's Kelly. She's amazing. We love her. Our band loves her. So she called me and said, I think there might be an opportunity for you here on this Red Rocks thing. And I went, what are you talking about? And I just picked up the phone myself, and all of a sudden I realized what they were looking for. And I personally sent over some details, and next thing you knew, there we were playing Red Rocks. We had the whole stage to ourselves, and 7,000 people out there, 8,000 people, whatever it was, and watching us play at Red Rocks. It was unbelievable.
That's a dream venue. So that's the highlight, I would say. What about the worst show, where either just the sound isn't right or no one shows up and you still have to play a big set? What's the worst that you've done?
Man, that's tough, because most of the stuff we do, especially when we're out on tour support with guys, all that stuff is kind of triple checked. Okay, no. You know what? I had a feeling I would come with one. We did do a 4th of July festival, and the sound guys were basically hired by the city, and they had never been sound guys. They were just a band who owned gear. They didn't even know how to work it. And we laugh about it to this day, because there's this video at the end of 3 of us standing just shredding on our guitars, and they're not even in the speakers. We're just shredding and there's just no noise coming out, and it's the drums were so loud and the bass wasn't even working. And so there was basically the sound of an acoustic guitar play. I mean, it was so terrible. And I remember just leaving so pissed off at the end of it. Why do we even bother?
That's funny. And so when you think about performing with your band, which we won't say with your band, when Mark Mackay performs, what size rooms are you filling these days?
Well, it depends on the market. That's another thing I didn't know about music when I got into it, is it takes a lot to get to that level where we'll get there someday, where you're a stadium act, that it doesn't matter what city you're in, what day of the week it is, you fill a stadium, But at our level, I mean, if we're out supporting somebody, those could be anywhere from 4,000 to 15,000. We did one with Tim that was 35,000, I think. And
Damn.
We're certainly not short of getting to play some big venues. But, for as a headline act, we live a lot in that 300 to 700 range, depending on the venue.
And you're signed to a major music label, Universal. I think that happened pretty recently. When that happens, is it something that's lucrative right away, or is it still all about putting out the album and it's all about sales?
No, it's still about sales and growing the brand. And it's just having an amazing arm that has everything from the greatest publicists to marketing people to music promotion people. But it's still just about putting out the best songs with the best strategy and building it piece by piece. The record industry is not what it was back then. I hear about the blockbuster deals that a Taylor Swift or somebody signs, but I also hear about acts like John Mayer that just say, I don't need a label anymore, because the business is so different. I did always imagine that when I signed the record deal, I would jump into a Ferrari that day and say that I pulled it off, and don't get me wrong, everything's always better once that happens. But no, it's not just an instant thing. It's just more hard work. The hard work starts now.
Are there other revenue streams for you? Do you create soundtracks or sell your music to commercials or anything like that?
No, I don't. Our main revenue stream has always been touring, which, by the way, is basically the biggest revenue stream in the game now is touring. That's why, if you can get to the level that some of these guys get to, that's where everyone makes their money, is touring, But I do some stuff like some solo songwriter, storyteller hour type stuff. I do some corporate stuff where companies will hire us. I talk a little bit and play some of the songs that we've written and tell some stories and stuff. That's certainly a revenue stream. But being out on the road, man, that's still the number one game, But you can't grow that without the other things, the music and the socials and the everything else moving,
Yeah, totally. Well, at this point, we could go on about the music and the socials and everything else. We're not going to. I'll say I saw you live once. I was blown away. I'm not a country guy, but your talent was evident, and everybody should check you out. But at this point in the podcast, I have something that I call inappropriate questions. I get someone that to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. This week, I was able to get a guy whose wife is your number one fan. I'm talking about sales rep extraordinaire Craig Wingard to ask you the questions. And are you ready for question number 1 from Craig?
Let's do it.
Okay, and before I even get into question number 1, is it true that your first tour and many other tours have been you using Craig's vocal sales rep truck, and that's what you head out on the road with?
It's tattooed on my arm. There's a tattoo on my right arm. I mean, I have a whole sleeve, but there's a tattoo of a vocal truck driving down Highway 395. That was our very first tour, getting from LA to Northern California. And yes, Craig is the man.
All right, so the ex-Atomic rep has a vocal tattoo, which is interesting enough. And we will jump into Craig's first inappropriate question. Here it is.
Okay.
As a country rock star, have you ever come close to going on stage without a notable piece of your musical equipment?
Yes, I have. With Craig standing right there, we were playing the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas in front of 6,000 people, and the background music that we walk out to started. And there was Mark Mackay standing on the side of the stage, realizing that I didn't have my guitar. It was 4 flights of stairs in the green room. And I ran down 4 flights of stairs. I grabbed my guitar and I barely made it on. And his wife to this day will tell you that I was out of breath on the first song. And no shit, Christy.
All right. That's question number 1. Let's jump into question number 2.
I know you work out a lot when you're on the road. Could you elaborate on your medicine ball workout routine?
He's asking because when I was first, learning to be a gym guy, because that's what we have to do on the road, someone taught me all these high intensity workouts, and I went into the local gym in Tahoe Donner when I was up there, and I slammed a ball thinking it was a sand ball that would stop dead, and instead it exploded and basically killed me. Craig has that footage of me slamming a medicine ball at full force and collapsing on the ground. It's quite a spectacular video.
Oh man, that's funny. I'm going to have to ask him to send that my way.
The one last thing I got to add to that, because you said that's funny. So after I was finally coherent enough to talk that day, because it was really bad, we went back to the gym because I left all my stuff there, and my girlfriend Valerie went up to the front desk and said, "Hey, any chance you have that video?" And the guy was like, "Come back here. We've been watching it all day."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we'll jump into your final inappropriate question.
Okay.
How many total years were you a ski rep, and how many actual times do you think you skied during that tenure?
I was always working demos in vans and jeans, and people think I didn't ski, but I bet I skied more than Craig Wingard thinks I did. But I don't know how to put a number on that. I probably should have skied more than I did, and I should have been a better skier than I was.
All right. Well, that is Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And when I met you at the High Five Silver Tie Gala, I had no idea we would podcast. But when I heard you were the Atomic rep, it was like, dude, I've got to tell this story because no one outside of Matt Reardon has transitioned from ski to music, and you're absolutely crushing it right now. And the coolest part of your story is how you've been able to switch careers, and time again, everything that you've jumped 500% into, you've been really successful every step of the way, and that's a cool thing. So I thank you for your time, and I look forward to listening to some of your music.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me. Great interview.
So that was time with Mark Mackay, and what a life that guy's lived so far. If you're anything like me, at some point in your life, you thought, oh, it would be so cool to be a ski rep and go mountain to mountain to ski. That was the dream at 19, and that's the age that Mark made the dream happen. In an industry where people have to almost die for a job to open up, Mark landed a few of the best as a teenager. And then, while he was in his prime, he's like, I'm going to go get paid. And then he crushes it selling medical devices. But money wasn't everything, and Mark had the skills to become a rock star, and it was time to make it happen. And that's what he's doing right now. And I wonder what he's going to decide to do once he's content with where he is in the music world. Because based on everything he's done, he's going to get to a point where he's totally satisfied with what he's doing, and he's going to find something else that he's passionate about. That's the podcast. At this point, I want to thank all of you for listening, ask you to please review me wherever you listen, and please, please, please support the incredible brands that make this thing happen. They are Peter Glenn Ski & Sports, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Elan Skis, Best Day Brewing, and Seek Skate Camp. Have a great week, everyone.